and welcome to episode 138 of Two Left Thumbs, your weekly gaming podcast that is still in holiday mode. I'm Jeff Puppiez, and joining me this week, it's Josh. How you doing, mate?
How you keeping? I'm doing splendid. It's absolutely splendid, I must say. Really good.
That's excellent to hear. That's good. You been up to much today? Or you just finished the work day? You said you work weird hours.
No, so I do yeah, most days I'm working probably 18, 20 hours, so my work day doesn't stop really.
You- you're one of those insane people that just don't stop. I love it.
Yep.
It's good. Got to keep busy. You're busy. But for those that are here and listening and playing at home, let's start with the obvious. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't know, I'm Josh Loveridge, managing director of Stratton Studios. Stratton Studios is a game developer and publisher based here in Wicklow, Ireland, and we focus on single player narrative experiences for the console market. So on consoles on the likes of Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo Switch, all that good stuff. And we've been around since around 2017ish.
Right, excellent. So around since 2017. Let's let's get into how you started with this, because you started the business side of these things when you were quite young, correct?
Yeah. I think business kind of started, it kind of all started formulating. I was around 16ish, going on 17. That kind of, I was working on it for a couple of years previously before I actually started trading. But it kind of, so essentially how it all started was coming out of school. I just didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't really have a clue about, like, kind of really life in general at that stage. So I was just like, all right, I don't know what I want. So the only thing I know is games. The only thing that I've done my whole life is just spent like 12 hours a day playing games. And I was like, well, I've put a lot of time into them, so I'll give that a go and just see. We'll just see what happens. And yeah, as soon as I started, I fell in love with the process and the creative field. It just kind of all started to click. When I started kind of going into education of games, how kind of, games are made and learning, I started out with animation, learning all the kind of nuances and technicalities of that, then actually moved into the programming side of things, learning C sharp. And I just wanted to know more constantly. Um, and as that kind of went on, I found myself very quickly kind of ascending ranks within the local kind of game dev ranks. Games were looking better than anyone else's. I was kind of learning new things at a much faster pace, and it was just kind of all clicking together. And then kind of what happened was it got to a stage where, after numerous releases on, kind of free game releases, it was kind of like, okay, well, this is kind of going somewhere now, so I need to kind of open a business for it. It needs to kind of, like, if I actually want to make games and give this a go, I have to, make a business. So then essentially what happened was I formed a company called Loveridge Designs, which isn't around anymore. Which was a game development company slash media kind of creation service. It was essentially just, do whatever to get money, pretty much, because at that point it was just, it was kind of all bootstrapped together. So essentially what happened then was, we continued making games, and in the meantime we were doing some, like, websites and content creation on the side, and all which I had learned through games and how to make games and stuff like that. And then what eventually, kind of fast forward a little bit, essentially they got both sides got very big. They got very big, and it came to a point where it was like, okay, it kind of it needs to split. So they split
Right.
off
Yep.
and splintered into two separate companies. So Loveridge, the content creation, Loveridge design, then really split it into new company, which is Loveridge Digital. And the game side of things split into Stratton Studios. And that's how that kind of formulated, and they're both still operating today. So it kind of, but more on the game side of things, we really got our first big break was after a couple mobile releases. So we done a couple mobile releases. Then essentially what happened was I created it was more of a tech demo, a tech demo of a horror game that I had an idea for. It was called The One We Found, and it was essentially a first person survival horror kind of Resident Evil style shooter where the player was set in an asylum. And I essentially, that tech demo got picked up by the guys at ID at Xbox, and they signed me on as a dev pretty much. They signed on Loveridge Design, which was Stratton Studio, which is now Stratton Studios, as an idea at Xbox dev, and that's kind of how I started into the console market. And kind of working on that once we became an idea at Xbox member, it was kind of okay. We've kind of reached the upper ranks of the kind of the regional circuit. Now we're back to the bottom ladder of the big boys. We're now in the sea and we're a little minnow. So it was kind of you know it was hard. It was hard that very first game to kind of figure out all these processes, because there is no playbook on how to run a games company really. There's so much things you have to worry about, like ratings, all the different regions, how publishing works, all these different things, margins, um your CPAs, all these different things that a game business has to worry about. So we were, and while making great games as well, it was an interesting kind of mix that you had to kind of fondle, I suppose. And then, so fast forwarding after that, we kind of then after The One We Found released, we learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes on it. We got a lot of feedback from players, released on Xbox One. And yeah, we kind of learned a lot from that and kind of said, right, okay, we need to take a step back here, and we need to rethink the angle we're approaching this at, and come at this from a different way. Now, I've always believed that in business as a whole and in anything, you need to be creating something that you really like. And I'm obsessed with Halloween. So, and I realized that there was quite a big gap in the gaming market for Halloween titles. There really isn't any, like
Yeah.
you've
No,
got
it's mostly
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
You've got horror games, and that's about all there is. There's no like Halloween specific games. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I kind of then said, okay, well, that's our niche, and that's what we're going to do. We're just going to do Halloween games. That's all we're doing now. So then, based upon that, we decided, okay, it's time for it's time we're going to make a collectathon, because not many people know this, but the games market actually works in a 15-year cyclical cycle. So every 15 years, what was popular 15 years ago actually comes back up again and starts to get popular. So I around this
Right.
time,
Okay.
I kind of foreseen this happening, and lo and behold, the year that we made our next game, Castle Costume, all these new games were coming out, like Ukulele and A Hat in Time, so it worked out. So it was quite funny that the hypothesis worked out. But yeah, so we made a Halloween themed third person action adventure game, kind of a collectathon style, similar gameplay to Banjo Kazooie, that was set in this like kind of mystical Halloween world, where essentially there was this there was this boy who had his sock taken, and he was angry because someone took his sock on Halloween night. So essentially, he decided that Halloween was finished and no one could celebrate Halloween anymore. And it was about the player's journey to kind of save Halloween. It was kind of, very targeted at a much more younger audience that,
Yep.
was kind of into that more simpler style of gameplay. So that released that released on Halloween. I think that was 2018, if I'm correct. I'd have to check. But yeah, released, and then that released on PlayStation 4, and we got a lot better feedback off that game. Done decently well. So we still had a lot to work on. There were still a few fundamental key areas that we were missing, I suppose. And yeah, based upon that, we said, okay, right, we need to get to work straight away on our next title. What are we going to do? Are we going to do another collectathon? Um, Now, then I kind of said, okay, well, you know, we need to pivot slightly and do what we're very good at and kind of try and avoid what we're not great at or bad at. Work to our
Yep.
strengths, not to our weaknesses. So then I decided, okay, right, we're going to make a monster taming game in the Halloween style from a top down perspective, because one of the main things and the main critiques, I suppose, that a lot of people had about a castle costume was they were like, oh, the camera. Collectathon and 3D games, there's always usually a complaint about cameras. They're very hard to get right for everyone,
Yeah, yeah.
you
There's
know?
always. I think I've found that with a lot of games where, especially with third person, it's such a tricky one where the camera is always seems to be that one sticking point for everyone because where do you put it in certain situations? And I mean, I'm sure on the development side of things, that's not exactly an easy thing to keep tamed as well.
Yeah, so it's quite it's quite a difficult way of kind of running about it. So we essentially said, right, we're going with top down perspective, kind of isometric, and fixed camera. It'll make things easier. Um which it didn't in all the ways, but that was something that we learned kind of in development of our newest game, which was Costume Kingdom, which essentially, as I was saying, was a monster taming third person action adventure game set in this based Halloween themed town called Monkchester, where essentially the player took the role of a young schoolboy called Rayan, who essentially um, found these little creatures called Holomon in the world. And pretty much they populate the world and they're kind of integrated with society. And then comes along this kind of evil, overarching kind of big baddie that you have to beat because they want to essentially take control of the Holomon and, stop Halloween essentially. So it was kind of it was a nice little fun game. It was around 3 hours long. And based upon that, we got great feedback. I think it was yeah, we it done much better. Like, really, really happy with the feedback we got. And people really enjoyed it. And in the meantime, we've been kind of building our community, building the Stratton ecosystem around the studio, and just kind of continuing to grow and work at what we're doing to become better console developers, and to provide experiences that people enjoy and that people come away from feeling like they've got something back from it. So yeah, that's really a kind of a rundown of where we started to where we are now. Now we're working on our latest title, which is called Splink: The Journey of One, which is a monochromatic 2D platformer, kind of puzzle platformer with based in this weird kind of mysterious world that's kind of seeded in mythology. And the essentially the character is the last of his race, and he has to go on this journey to either save save the race that he is, or essentially destroy it. And that's what's going to be found out throughout the game pretty much. So it's
Yeah,
that's
cool.
what we're working on at the
That sounds
moment.
really
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah. So, coming from like developing like smaller mobile titles into that the ID at Xbox indie space, what were some of the big differences for you? And like you mentioned, some of the challenges that you faced. What were things that like that you kind of came across? Things you didn't expect. I mean, there's always the little fish, big pond as well. There's a lot more out there once you kind of get into that space. But for you and just you, what were some of those challenges kind of transitioning from those two different markets?
I think the biggest thing that shocked me and the biggest kind of eye opener was that how little the game space is really, how controlled the game space is. Not many people know, but really the games market is controlled by three or four companies. Um,
Yeah,
you've got big massive groups like the Embracer Group who own over 90 studios, I think, and they're all the popular AAA studios. Like the market is taken up very solely by a number of people. And I suppose that presents a number of challenges because it's kind of you fall in line or you fail. That's kind of the way the
right.
console
Okay.
market that's the way the console market works from just an overall perspective. It's a harsh business. It really is. It's not a kind of a nice little wonderland of kind of everyone makes their own games and everyone does what they kind of you know what maybe want to do. It's kind of there's very heavy limitations put on what can be created. There's a lot of regulation. So there's a lot of rules, a lot more rules than originally, one would think there would be. Like, a common thing I hear from players is that, when they talk about developers, especially, it's like, oh, well, why don't you just do that? That'd be really cool. That'd be great to implement. Like, why can't you have appearances from different characters in this game? Why can't you do that? And
Yeah.
a lot of it's all red tape. It's all red tape to hold these things kind of back, and it's kind of yeah, it's an interesting one, and just kind of learning how Stratton fits within to that ecosystem because everyone finds their own niche within the console market. They really do, and yeah, it was just the biggest shock. To reality really was how this actually business works and how we can survive in that while still focusing on the core values of the company that I wanted to portray. Like, I have a big ethos thing with regards to gaming companies not treating their players correctly. I feel
Yep.
that in the current market that we're in, it's way too predatory, and that, it's kind of game companies are looking at their players as just money bags currently, and they're just trying to extract as much money as possible. And it's not what made gaming great. What made gaming great initially was the guys like innovators like, John Romero with Doom and all these great games that really weren't built on a vast like quest for monetization. They were built on a quest to provide an experience that brings someone's day up just that little bit more. And I suppose that's what I feel gaming needs to come back to. And that's what I am constantly trying to strive Stratton towards is to get that kind of, really, really high level, uh high level engagement with our players. Like, we really do care about our players. We want our players to be able to integrate with us as much as possible because at the end of the day, as a games company, without our players, we're nothing. We're literally nothing at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
I don't feel that gets brought across enough in the current climate that we're in today. And I think that, the only way to change that is to be that kind of, enigma in the space that's just kind of like, no, we're doing it differently. We're taking a different approach. It's a much slower approach. It's not that it really isn't a fast approach to, gain that cult following, I suppose, but that's not our mission. Our mission is to do it right and do it well, because that's what lasts. And yeah, so it's just really figuring out how that's going to fit into the to the lion, so to speak, without causing too much problems. So
Do you
yeah.
think that'll change at all? I mean, I know like recently, especially the last couple of years, we've seen a lot more pushback against monetization, predatory practices. A lot more indie devs coming through doing really really good games and showing that it can be done while treating both people that play your game and the people that work on your game with fucking some respect, which is brilliant to see. And I love supporting the smaller devs that are doing that now. Seeing like games like Hades and stuff like that coming out, which are really breaking through to the market and um, getting through with like decent practices and really beating out these large AAA companies who are not so great on the whole everything front. So do you think as someone who kind of sees kind of behind the scenes a bit more, do you think there's a shift coming in that regard?
Um, so having I do a lot of consultancy work with AAA companies. Um, like I've seen behind the closed doors of what happens there and how that works. And as a uh, as a business person, it's amazing what they built, how they built as such I like to refer to it as a herd. How they built a herd that falls in line, and anyone that goes out of line just gets wiped off immediately. But as a fun ethically, I don't believe it's right. Now, do I think it's going to change? Yes, I do think it's going to change, because the world in general is moving to a more open communication kind of culture. And as that happens, and as people learn what happens behind closed doors, they're just going to say, listen, that's not allowed. Like, one big thing that a lot of business owners in the game space push against is unionization. They're like, oh, no, we can't let the unions get involved. If the unions get involved, we can't. We can't like make slaves of our staff. Pretty much, that's what a lot of the
Yeah,
attitude there is. Um, but I think as that starts to happen, which it is, it's going to cut out all that, nonsense, and it's going to move back towards a much more wholesome kind of, ecosystem. But I also think it's a shock for the players, because I don't know if you've noticed, but the player base has changed majority. Like toxicity within the game space has it, it's a lot more prevalent than it used to be. Um, you know, People are just vicious in the game space.
yeah. It's pretty remarkable. Like watching it, like someone that has been involved with a lot of game communities, kind of growing up, and I'm sure you have as well. I don't know if it's just because everyone has the option to have a voice now about it, and we're seeing it more, or if it's a mindset situation where as things progress, we're getting that very us versus them mentality really pushed into it, and that's where the toxicity is coming from. Or yeah, if it's something like I said, like it's just there's more people with an option to say something now, thanks to the wonders of the internet. Um, Everyone just kind of gets on their soapbox and can scream as loud as they want, and they can find the more like-minded people to scream with them. So it becomes this very kind of large, loud minority kind of situation where that's all you're hearing.
Yeah. It's a tricky one, but I think that the way the game space has evolved from a business perspective has affected the player base and how they perceive companies, games companies. Like a lot of genuine gamers are always saying, "Oh, I wanted to go back to the way it was," but yet the players don't want that. Actually, if it did go back to that way, players would hate the games that they're making. Like, it's very rare, and there's a high volume of player base that will not kind of be interested in that style of games. A lot of people like single player games anymore. Often sometimes people say it's a dying breed until something like Skyrim comes around, and then everyone wants to get back in. Like, so it's an interesting one, but I think the space has fundamentally changed, and to go back to that, I don't think we can. I think we'll have to form like a new kind of happy medium, and that will
Yeah.
only happen over time. But like, the game space is a very young space. Like, we haven't been around for too long, really. So it it
It must have been
changes.
since
It
like
flip flops.
the 70s, 80s. It's really kind of truly formed back
Yeah,
then, like with like games like Doom and stuff. And yeah, it's only 20 or 40 years. And comparing that to
yeah,
like the music and movie industry, which the gaming industry has quickly overtaken in popularity. Um, it's going to be interesting to see where gaming and the gaming industry itself is in like 20 years.
yeah. Yeah. No, it's going to be very interesting. And it's constantly evolving too. New technologies, as new technologies come out, new things, will take over, and that will take precedent, and that hopefully will adapt the player's mindset and the developer's mindset too, because it has to be that happy medium between the players and the developers. I don't think this us versus them mentality is healthy for the space as a whole, and it's not healthy for employees, because and it's something not a lot of people think about. But every time you are blasting a game on Twitter or anything like that, or whoever's doing, that's someone's work. Like, that's something that someone's probably spent more hours than, like, someone would work normally. Like, crunch is a big thing in the game space. Now, I'm one of them people that loves crunch. I'm in an eternal crunch, and I just love it. That's just
Yep.
me. But I know 99% of the population do not like that, and they need that kind of timeout. They need that respite. So, and that's okay, but it, it's very disheartening when someone sees essentially someone else crapping on their work in not a constructive way. And especially, just think of the example I like to give is, and I know some of the guys that worked at CD Projekt Red, just think how all them felt with Cyberpunk. Like, I know every single employee that I know that worked there did not want that game to go out. And
We're right. Interesting. I mean, I
when
know a lot of it's kind of corporate, kind of going, this game comes out this day and you deal with it. There's borderlines pressed on from forces that they have absolutely no control. So they're just kind of going to do the best they can. I think that's an interesting thing. I mean, it happens kind of with most kind of service industries as well, where especially when you don't see the person that's working on whatever it is, so like I work in kitchens, so you don't see me as the chef, and so it's easy to go, well, it kind of dehumanizes the whole situation. It's like, well, why wasn't this done better, when there could be outside factors, and that comes through obviously with the gaming industry, because there are so many people working, there's hundreds of people working on these games with so many
yeah,
different components, like rope physics to sound design, um, to just media management as well. And they're just doing the best they can with the situation they have. And I think that's something a lot of people forget too, is that, like I said, there are people working on these things, and some of this stuff is well out of their control.
yeah. No, 100%. Especially on the AAA side of things, nothing's dictated by the actual developers. It's dictated to them. That's like,
Yeah.
and that's something that not a lot of people kind of, I suppose, take into consideration. But it's just one of those things. Like, there's always going to be problems with the space, and as we evolve, we're going to have to just continue to overcome them. So it just really is one of those things. But I think definitely a better focus on kind of a more player consumer centric approach is the approach we take at Stratton. And it builds great communities, it really does. And it builds loyal communities too, and that's what you want really as a game studio.
Yeah, definitely. So back to Stratton for a little bit. So you guys have made four different games now in the indie space. Um, all very
um
different styles.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, we were about to say something.
I was just about to say we're on our fourth. So we had the one we found,
You're on your
Castle
fourth, yeah.
Costume. Yeah, yeah.
So the different styles. I mean, like you said, just sticking. You're as you're kind of developing these games, you're finding those strengths and weaknesses that you and your team are both good at, and things you struggle with. Um, has jumping from genre to genre like that helped, or is that just kind of we want to make as many diverse games as possible, or is that kind of part of the process of growing as a studio, just kind of figuring out where it is you want to make those games?
I think it's a matter of you don't know what you're good at until you've tried it,
Yep.
essentially. Um, I think that each studio has to find their niche, and I always say, I never want to, get old and then be like, what if, what if we had a done a monster taming game? Could that have been the fire, the light switch? Like, could that just be our thing? So and it allows us to develop too and upskill as developers constantly because we know all these genres. We come across numerous different problems to overcome. And like I personally really feel that the game we're working on now, 2D monochromatic, we've adapted to this style very, very well. Um and it's I really liking this. It's been one of the smoothest development processes ever that we've had. So it's been great.
Yep.
Um and we've also allowed ourselves a little more time because typically we're on a 1 year timeline. We were essentially trying to, churn out games, but now we're taking a more, okay, this will go out when it's ready approach because we're looking to get to that next level because we've got to we've got to a good point where it's like, uh a lot of common reviewers saying like, 6, 7 out of 10 type thing. We want that 8 and 9. That's what we want. We
Yeah.
want to get to that
Constantly
next
pushing
level.
for that improvement. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and to do that, it needs to be right and it needs to be ready when the game is ready. The game and the kind of the approach with this one is, the game's going to tell us when it's ready to go, and then we'll push it out. So yeah, it's but it developing a multi like kind of range of titles is it's very important, I think, for as a developer because you need to. Otherwise, you're very one dimensional. And what if that style of game that you make and your studio makes is goes out of popularity? Like look at collectathons.
Yeah. Yeah.
They like it can go as shooters as well. They kind of they don't go out of popularity completely, but they're hot at certain periods. Everyone wants a shooter. Everyone's just snapping up shooters. So I think it just and it allows us to be just kind of more well-rounded developers as a whole and solve problems quicker. Like the way we've solved problems in 3D, we've adapted to 2D, and it's just made for a much better kind of a more polished experience.
Yeah, that's really cool. So yeah, like I said, you're learning things as you go, which is great. I think that's something that should always be happening in any position or any kind of profession. Is you should be kind of trying to better yourself in that field or broaden your experience as much as possible. So the team is Stratton. I know the last couple of years, with COVID and all the lockdowns and stuff, would make things especially challenging. How have you guys, as a company, kind of overcome that?
I think that COVID and the coronavirus as a whole was we were the best built company to deal with that. Put it like we never stopped. It never
Yeah.
even like we were able to just light switch and we're good. And my big thing with business as a whole and companies is that you build a good foundation. A hurricane's not going to rock you. And that's a big thing, and that's in all my businesses. I build that out. I think a very strong system and processed out business that is good and great culture can adapt to these situations, and we adapted perfectly. Like a lot of games got, massively pushed back. If anything, it gave us a little bit of an edge because we were still working while a lot of people weren't able to. So it hasn't really affected us in a traditional sense. I suppose the only way it's affected us is with third party suppliers. So, say for example, we've like a 2D maybe artist that does some cover art or something. Maybe they're not on working, so it makes pushes them things out. But that was really the only kind of delay we seen. And I suppose the way I kind of address problems and with the team, it's kind of like, well, you know, regardless of the issue that you come across, if you've a strong fundamental way of solving problems, it doesn't matter what problem you get, you can solve it. And kind of we take that divide and conquer approach to every challenge that comes up. May that be, kind of pandemics or whether that's just, certain bugs within the game. We approach it the exact same way.
Awesome, that's really good. I think again now that we've had this kind of situation arise, we're going to see a lot more companies, especially gaming, kind of lean into that kind of more moldable way of working. A lot of people are working from home, and I think like a lot of businesses in general have realized that's something I've noticed. They don't need the offices. Like working from home has, it's bumped up so much productivity. People are happier because they're not going in to be stuck in a cubicle all day, just slave away. They can kind of do things kind of at their own pace. Like they can take a
Yeah.
break for 5 minutes if they want to, and not feel guilted into like I'm in that workspace environment. I must do that. Whereas working from home, it's a much more comfortable environment for them. So they're becoming they're happier and more productive, which I think is fantastic. It's doing a lot of offsetting that. It's doing a lot of things to different industries, which has been interesting to watch other industries like the hospitality industry and the tourism industry kind of adapt to. Which I've seen a lot of companies struggle with recently, but I think going forward, I think that's going to be the way things are going to go now. Is like it's going to be a lot more working from home, a lot less office space, and a lot more kind of using the tools we have, which is the internet and everything that comes with that,
Yeah.
because it just makes things so much easier.
Yeah, no, 100%. It definitely does. And as a games company, you have to have these things in place. And, a lot of the bigger companies that, kind of I have connections with, or I know the owners, it's kind of like, well, you know, you were kind of warned about this a couple years back that really you should have strong infrastructure in place within the company, and now it's just you didn't have a strong kind of crisis contingency plan in place, and now you have to face the consequences of it, face the music. So it's just one of those things. I do think it'll move more towards kind of decentralization, with regards to companies and how they work. um, the only main issue with that though is data security and kind of keeping that all under wraps, especially on the AAA side of things. It's very, very tight. They like to keep everything so tight lidded. That put it this way, kind of imagine if you were working on the next Call of Duty and you had a build on your home network, and someone got into it or something like that. It's kind of that's where the problems come in, or the
It's
source code. And yeah, so tricky.
yeah, it's not exactly a difficult thing to do now. Especially with home networks being, I mean, I'm sure a lot of companies have like, you will use this secure network that we're using, but there's like so much so much human error that can
Yeah.
happen with that kind of thing, and it may not even be the person that's working on this fault. It could be a family member just hit a wrong setting. It's kind of opened up a vulnerability, and people will exploit that because people are wonderful. It's so good.
Yeah. They will indeed.
Yeah. Um. So you obviously started very young. 17 when you kind of started working on your first, or we kind of did your first acquisition for a company. So for people for looking to get into kind of what you do in the media and marketing and games development, what kind of starting advice would you give them? Some things that you've learned, some nuggets of wisdom, if you will.
Um, Fail hard and fail fast, I suppose, is the thing, and just be willing and ready to get back up no matter what challenges gets presented. Like the way I tell people is if you're the type of person that gives up after your first try, don't even bother trying because you won't make it. You really won't. Like, we've been doing this for years and we're still not there. And we're still striving to get to that point that we want to get. It's a constant you're like a lot of people think, and a lot of people have a common misconception about running the business as a whole, whether that be games, anything, is that running the business is easy, you're the boss, you don't have to listen to anyone. And it's like, no, you're never the boss. You're never the boss. The boss you become Your boss becomes your clients, who in this case are players. They're the ones who dictate what I do. They're telling me what I do. I have you live it looks easy, but it's one of the most difficult things you will ever do. And if you're not willing to put in the hours to do it, you probably won't succeed. Like the chances of success of a business are extremely low. Like it's crazy low. I think it's like, around 3% now. It's terrible.
Yeah,
And
it's
it's
volatile out there.
yeah, it's a tough space. And, to make it, you have to give yourself the best chance possible. And the only way to do that is to work hard and to work fast, and don't be afraid to fail, and don't be afraid to learn, and don't give up. It's all about having that resolve and that long term vision that what you are doing is going to get closer to your goal, and not being that kind of very short kind of minded vision that a lot of people have. Like if you're thinking and dreaming, oh, I want to own a games company because I want to spend my life playing games. Like, I'll be honest, I haven't played a game in years. I really haven't. Because I don't
Oh,
have
really?
time.
That
Yeah.
was gonna kind of I was gonna lean into that with my next question, because you like you said, you work, like you're kind of,
Yeah.
you've got yourself permanently in that crunch mode. Like, if you have time for games, what are you playing? I mean, it's obviously been a while. When was your last video game that you played? What was the last one you played?
I think it was Soma. Soma.
Oh
Yeah.
right, wow.
Yeah, that was my last title that I played. Like, I know what's going on in the market. I know the new games play styles they're implementing. I know the new title. But yeah, I had to give that up. I had to give, and it's funny. Um it's a funny paradigm. I think it's very
Yeah.
funny. And you'll see a lot of people and they'll say, "Oh no, I still play games on the weekends and stuff." If that works for them, fine. It probably just means they're not pushing as hard as they can push. Like, with my vision for everything is always that I don't want to be good. I want to be great, and I want to leave a legacy. That's kind of what I want to do. And so yeah, I had to give that up. But yeah, it was a funny paradigm, and I always say to people is that to reach the goal that I may reach, I had to actually give up what I loved the most, which was, playing games and that whole thing. So it's kind of like it's kind of like that. Yeah, it's quite interesting. But I suppose it's all towards a greater goal, and the greater goal is, changing people's lives for the better in a way that's good for everyone. And like the way it works is if you've got employees, you are changing lives because you then become responsible for their lives. You close your company. there goes their job, there goes their security. You know, there's a ripple. It's kind of like the butterfly effect. So it's yeah, but games, yeah, no, I don't really have much time at all. No, I haven't played the game since then. Yeah, typically the way we work it is I have a team of kind of essentially game researchers that play games, and I get reports back on everything, and then I might watch, you know, a little bit of gameplay while I'm, you know, been going to a meeting or whatever, you know. So I kind of just fit it
Yeah.
in when I can, but yeah, it's mostly yeah, that kind of process. It's strange because you will hear a lot of game developers say, "Oh yeah, they spend a lot of their time playing games," you know. But everyone has a different process. I suppose I come from a very strange background with games in that I'm in traditional business too, and not many game developers are in traditional business also, which I suppose is that kind of difference in that, you know, it's kind of it
Yeah,
kind of
just giving you
tilts
that
me more
different perspective on how things work, and you have like
yeah,
different viewpoints on what you should be doing to kind of get to where you need to be. You know, where like
yeah,
you'll find people like that are like more, I want to say it, less business minded and more creatively minded, where connecting with the medium itself helps drive the inspiration for them to kind of go forward.
yeah,
Whereas things are obviously different for you. You're very business minded, which is fantastic because that's what you need to be able to drive a company. Because if you go in artistic, it's not gonna it's trickier to
yeah.
navigate because you don't understand the systems to play as much. I mean, it's obviously
Yeah, and
something
I
that can be
think
learned as well. Yeah,
yeah, I think it's something as well that you're setting your. I suppose this way, a lot of the guys that are like that, they never really start to own big companies. They kind of stay solo. It's kind of, you know, that more kind of, you know, artistic, creative dream where they're kind of like, you know, they just get their enjoyment is they spend a couple hours a day working on their game. They might spend 5 years working on the game, and that's their piece. Which, if that's the way if that's what they're content and happy with, who's, you know, fair play to them, you know,
definitely.
all
Yeah,
the best. Yeah, it's whatever works for you. But for me personally, I am just one of them people who likes the grind. I really do. You know, I like the process, and I enjoy the process, and I enjoy, you know, building things. It's yeah, it's good.
awesome, awesome. What games did you used to play? So like, you've obviously stopped, but like we talked about, you started playing games and then you just kind of started making games. What games? What were the games that kind of inspired you going forward to get into this to start with?
I used to play a multi kind of diverse range of games. So, you know, you know, obviously you have the classics: Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Crash, Spyro, Ratchet. Um, and then on the more like, you know, kind of horror side, you've got Resident Evil, Soma, you know, you've got all the Outlast, all these great games. And then on the more multiplayer side, you know, obviously you've got your CODs, your FIFAs, your Rusts, your Ark, your Armas. Um, you've got then what else would I have been playing? Minecraft, you know, all these different
Like,
titles. And then on the
there's
indie side,
everyone's played Minecraft at some point in their life, right? It's like
yeah,
the
I
one of
think
these staples, right? It's like there's like Minecraft, Mario, and Zelda as well, for the most part. It's like the holy trinity of kind of game franchises that most people have played.
yeah. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
100%. But yeah, no, and I enjoyed a lot of single player titles, a lot of single player titles. So I used to kind of work through them. I used to be one of them achievement hunters. I used to
Ah,
platinum as
yes.
many games as I could. Um, yeah. So I played a lot of strategy games as well. You know, Command and Conquer, Civ, all these different titles. Halo Wars, Halo, the massive inspiration was Halo. Loved Halo. Um, you know, around the Halo 3 kind of era. Um, Yeah, no, just kind of every game that was going, I was playing. Back in the day, like as I say, I used to spend. That's all I did was play games, pretty much. And yeah, I think and as and a way I describe it as well is I think when you start to make games, you lose that magic and wonder that games give you when you play them, essentially, because you realize what it's like knowing a magic trick, knowing how it's done. It's like
Yeah,
it's
it's the
kind of
whole
like
how the sausage is made kind of thing. You're like, you've seen it
yeah,
all. It's like, it's all right. The polish for that is gone now. The magic's gone. I know what this does. Um, and that's kind of it ruins it for you. I know I found that earlier when this podcast was a lot young, when we first started. It was like a gaming news kind of coverage. Um, and like just like looking, having to look at the industry constantly and what was happening. Um, it kind of like oh, a lot of this is kind of like, it's interesting, but some of it is really gross, and you start to notice the patterns in the predatory practices and things coming up, because it
yeah,
would always seem to be, this company's done this, or this company's done that, or this company's doing this thing, and it was always kind of the same kind of news, and it kind of takes some of the wonderment away from the industry, because you're like, all right, this is for the most part a giant fucking mess.
yeah,
And it makes you enjoy video games less because you feel bad. But on the other side of that coin, like we were speaking about earlier, individual people worked on these games, and you want to enjoy that and respect what they've brought to that title, that experience that you're now having. And it's kind of like the two sides of the coin for me. Is yeah, it can sometimes, the gaming industry can be a real shit, and again, that can come down to a lot of just people being greedy or just horrible in general. Um,
yeah.
but yeah, it does definitely take the polish out.
Yeah, no, it's definitely that kind of, and I think that's another reason why I don't I think that's another reason why, like, like I don't just, instead of working like 18 or 20 hours, I don't just work 19 and play games for an hour, because the magic is gone. It's a system now. I look at it as a system. I look at it as a piece of software. I can see everything they're doing. I know what's coming next. If I see some foreshadowing, in level one, a weenie, in the background, some tight corridors, I know where they're pushing me as a player. I know where they want me to be looking. It's kind of, there's never that what's over there. It's like, all right, over there is an invisible wall with, some decals, or it's kind of, it
Yeah,
just kind of takes it away. And I think it's moved that from experiencing that magic myself to providing that to others, because I know how that felt, and I'll always remember how that felt. And I think one of the big things that a lot of people are kind of, one of the joys in life, I think, for everyone, is the joy of giving. Being able to give something, or being able to make someone's day just that little bit better, is a very powerful thing, and it's one of the best things you can do. And I think that, being able to provide that, even if it's just, that's what I always say to the guys at Stratton too. It's kind of like, even if this game completely fails and everyone hates it, if as long as one person says, and as long one person says that made my day a little bit better, I enjoyed that, then it was all worthwhile. Doesn't matter about the monetary side of things. We'll worry about that. We'll fix that. But does the player enjoy the game, and can we provide what we were provided when we were kind of grown up, and when we were kind of getting into this whole thing? Because I think that wonder and that kind of escapism is something that is lost upon us in today's world, and it's something that we really, it's important for a lot of people to be able to experience that. And I think that that's one of the things that really drives me in the game industry, is to be able to give that to someone. It's a very powerful thing. So yeah, that's kind of my kind of stick with it. is that that's kind of our overarching goal, I suppose.
Awesome. Going forward, I mean, you guys are obviously working on a game now. You've obviously got plans into the future as well. What kind of things are you looking forward to work with? Any kind of technologies or um, different mediums in video games that you're kind of looking forward to kind of getting your hands in and trying out with your team?
Yeah, so as we are saying, I'm working on our newest console title, and we're also beginning to work on our a blockchain game. So we're beginning to work on that as well. And we're an official Engine partner. I don't know if you know who Engine are, but they're a big player in the kind of NFT gaming space. So
Right.
I'm a massive technology nerd, and I just love the decentralized technology. I think it's great, and just the kind of whole concept behind it. It's kind of like games were back in the day right now, like very rudimentary, very kind of, very basic. Not They're not professional developers in the space at the moment. And being
Right.
a professional developer in the space to come in and say, okay, this is how you do things. This is how, you know, this is how you kind of, because they don't understand game design a lot of, because they're a lot of them are just normal programmers, they're not developers. So being able to
Right.
kind of implement that in a way is something that we're very excited for. And then obviously bringing that to consoles too, obviously that's a very long way down the line, the technology's still behind on that, but in the meantime we're hoping to get some games going to help our audience further engage with us. So, for example, one of the concepts we're really excited for is um, to do like a governance style voting kind of little game where all our players can come in to like an app or a browser and actually vote on decisions in development for our game. So, say for example, we're
It's really
deciding
cool.
between, yeah, say we're deciding between like a rock and a pebble for a scene. We could put that up and be like, "Hey guys, what's everyone thinking?" And everyone can vote and everyone can see where people are voting, and just kind of make it a little like fun gamified experience, and just to engage people more and just to allow people to give us feedback, because that's one thing that a lot of that helps developers is feedback during development. What do players want to see? Because ultimately it doesn't matter what we think. Um, you're always going to be biased to your own game. That's just, you can try and put that bias away as much as possible, but it's always going to be there. So it's great to be able to get that feedback from players. So we're working on that at the moment. Too. That's kind of a little side project. But yeah, it's really all steams ahead on Splink and getting that finished off. We just finished our private alpha that went extremely well. Extremely well. Really, really happy with the feedback that we got. And yeah, just really now it's just the final push to get it over the line and then begin the port to consoles. We're still undecided what platforms we want to publish on, whether that be Sony or Nintendo. It'll either be might be both. We'll see. See how things
Right.
go. Um, Depending on, it really depends what we feel is going to be better suited for the gameplay, and you can only really tell that by actually testing it on the console. So we'll be doing that, and yeah, we're just excited to get that out. It's been a long project. Splink has, we've changed a lot of our internal processes. We've got on a load new people to help with Splink. We're really trying to level that up in all aspects. And yeah, we're just excited for the next like year or so, because I suppose with the whole, eh, voting thing, I just think it's going to engage the community so much more and allows people to get involved, because one of the
Yeah.
things when I was growing up,
No,
yeah.
you're
So
right.
one of the things when I was growing up was a big thing was that I always wanted to be involved in a game studio in some way. Like I always just felt like, I wanted the developer to feel to be I wanted to be heard in what I thought of the game. I wanted to be able to influence that and maybe even just a tiny little way. Um and to be able to give that to players is something that I'm really excited for. So yeah. It's an interesting concept, and not many other people are doing it. I don't think anyone's doing it at the moment.
I don't think I
Um,
haven't heard of anything like that before. I mean, I know there's places like Ubisoft that kind of get community involvement with like music tracks and stuff like that. They've done with like it was like was it Watch Dogs? Watch Dogs 3, I think they did it with, where they got people to kind of create art and music to implement into the game. I think, which I thought was a really cool concept. But I don't think there's been like a voting esque kind of system done properly. I mean, I know that there's been a few developers who go, we're doing this. What do you think? Or we might do this. You know, they get some opinions that way. I mean, which is probably the similar vein to what you guys are working on now, but nothing as detailed as what you're describing, at least that I've heard of
yeah,
anyway. I could be wrong though. But yeah, it sounds like it's a
yeah,
pretty unique idea, which I really like. And I think that's fantastic that you guys are trying to reach out to your community and get them involved with the process as much as possible. Because I think an important part of that is now that they've helped kind of make a decision in the game, they become more attached to
yeah.
um, that game that I helped with this, or you know they share their friends, and there's more involvement, and it's more personable for them, so I could be attached to that game, which I think is fantastic as well. Um,
Yeah.
it's really good for
No, yeah.
community building. Yeah,
Yeah, it's good. It's good, and it keeps yeah, it's everything we're about at Stratton, and it just kind of allows us for that deeper engagement with our community because we're heavily engaged. You know, I don't take the approach like I'm in the discords every day. Someone posts a message, I'm responding. You know, it's just kind of I kind of never wanted to be that thing where I can't interact with the community. That's just like I just think that's not okay, and I need to be fully integrated into the community to see what people are thinking and to hear where things are at because at the end of the day, as I was saying earlier, without the players we're nothing, like really nothing at
yeah,
all. So it's very important for us, and I think this is just a new way to do that, and it's just great through the power of what we can do. So why not do it? Like it's not a massive thing to have like a voting system. I just think a lot of the reason most games don't do it is because there's so much red tape in that one person can't make the final decision like Stratton, like Stratton has been offered to have publishers and stuff. We self-publish our games. We've been offered that route. We could take that route if we wanted, but it's not the route that I want for the company. I think that once you got start going down that route, ultimately you're losing control of what you want to do. And I think that when you build something that is so inclusive, I want it to stay that way. And I never want to be in a position with the company where I'm like, because I've been in the conversations with other developers where it's kind of like, all right, yeah, we wanted to do this, but we just got told no. And that's
right,
essentially and that's not what I want. Like I don't want if I want to if the community says they want something, they're getting it. Um and that's kind of the approach I take with it, and I think it's a decent approach. It's the way games were made really good back in the day. It's what made games like Doom good. Like a lot of people don't know how games initially started, and I always implore people to go look. It was really just in the back of magazines, guys just sending them each other, little tapes of their games that they made. And then, it kind of evolved over time, but it was all feedback driven. It wasn't, it wasn't done another way. And I think if we can do that too, and I think any games that are doing very well and are succeeding in their own niches. So yeah, it's just really that's our plan really for it. And I'm just excited for next year because Splink's only a couple. I'd say I'm hoping we'll have that finished by the end of the year. We'll see. We'll see how things go. Then there'll probably
yep,
be a couple month period for porting to whatever console and we're going to put it on. And then after that, we'll have to look at launch windows to see when fits. I imagine it'll probably be Q1 next year, maybe. We'll see. We'll see how things go, you know. But yeah, it's exciting times, really. I'm just, yeah, loving the space as always, and just excited to see what comes next, I suppose. Because games, 1 year in a games company is like 10 years in traditional, like, you know, business. So much happens, so much changes. You know, 1 week, you know, you're on one track, the next week it's getting switched to a different tracks, and it just kind of, you know, evolves so quickly.
Yeah, it is. It is a rapidly growing. Like I said, it's only a very young industry, and it is rapidly growing. And the technology coming along with that is also changing the landscape quite often, which is wonderful to see.
Yeah.
But Josh, thank you so much for joining me this week and giving us a little bit insight into, you know, your kind of skew of the games industry and marketing, and it's been a genuine pleasure listening to your insight and what you've had to say. So thank you for that. For those people that would like to find you and Stratton Games and all the things that you are working on, where can they find you?
Yeah, so the easiest place to find us is either on Instagram or Twitter. It's just Stratton Studios, and you can go onto our website, which is Stratton Studio Games, and yeah, you can just that all them have links to each other anyway, so they're all interchangeable, and they can find us on there. And if anyone does want to kind of contact me personally, even if they're just looking to get into the game space and they'd like to ask a question or, you know, anything like that, just hop into the Discord, say hi, and yeah, I'll write a response, or even just send me a DM, and yeah, I'll respond. Always more than happy to answer a question. You know, I think that's important to do also. So yeah, as I say, just reach out to us. We're pretty vocal. We're pretty visible. And we always do respond. So yeah, just reach out if anything pops up.
Awesome, excellent. For those that are looking at those, they're all those links that you need to find Josh and Stratton Studios will be in the description below. We'll also be tagging the socials in our usual posts that we do when the episode goes live. If you enjoyed the episode this week, get on there, give us a rating, say hi, let us know what you think. You know, we've changed a lot over the last 12 months. You know, we've been through a bit of changes as the podcast has gone. So I'd love to hear your feedback. If you've got any, if you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Twitter at left_pod. You can find us on Instagram at Two Left Thumbs Podcast. You will find the video versions of all our podcasts on our YouTube channel, which you can find at twoleftthumbs.online. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening this week and hanging out. Josh, again, thank you so much for coming in and having a chat. It's been genuinely wonderful chatting with you this morning. And yeah, everyone else, thanks for listening, and we will chat you next week. Bye.
See you guys.